archpriest Joseph Huneycutt, ordained in 1994. Father Joseph served with the Antiochian Archdiocese until 1997. From 97 until 2003, he served in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. Father Joseph is currently the vice chairman of the Antiochian Department of Missions and Evangelism, serves as the dean of the East Texas Deanery in the Diocese of Wichita and Mid-America, and is the pastor of St. Joseph Orthodox Church in Houston, Texas, which is an absolutely beautiful parish. Father Joseph, come on up.
So we'll stand and have a prayer. O heavenly King, comforter, the Spirit of truth, who art in all places and fillest all things, the treasury of good things and the giver of life, come and abide in us, cleanse us from every stain, save our souls, O gracious Lord. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Thanks to the old OrthoDixie podcast and OrthoDixie blog site, numerous presentations, I'm probably not going to say much new today. In fact, that's by design. The talk is entitled OrthoDixie under Reconstruction. And so much of what I say, you may have heard. Some of what I say, you will be shocked that I said it. All of it has been either published before on my podcast or blog site. I don't know if much of it would be submitted today, but there you go. I once gave a presentation at our cathedral in Brooklyn, and after my presentation, an older Middle Eastern man came up to me and he said, "I just figured out why I don't like you." And I said, "Why is that, Amu?" He said, "Because you're an entertainer, not a theologian." I said, "I've never claimed to be a theologian." So that explains a little bit of my reluctance of speaking to you today among a slate of excellent speakers. In my 20s, I moved off to Southern California to get rich and famous. I had majored in communications, worked in radio for about 10 years, wanted to get into writing for radio and television by doing stand-up comedy. And in those days, there was a talent show hosted by Ed McMahon called Star Search. So on Sunday nights, late on Sunday nights, you could get collect calls for cheap. So on Sunday nights from Southern California, I would call my parents, and every week, my dad would say, "Hey, I watched Star Search and I didn't see you." Well, I'm glad to say my dad, he would be proud today, God rest his soul, because I'm the opening act for Jim Jatras. 30 years a priest, things have changed a great deal, especially in the South, especially for the church. We're not only being invaded by newcomers, many of us, but culturally, we're facing another kind of reconstruction. And in case there's enemies among us, I'm not talking about what you think. There was a time when what was worth fighting for was God, country, and family. And nowadays, it's a foreign culture that's being foisted on us. And this time, it's not just the Yankees. It's the global, social, perverse, mass communication occupiers. We Southerners must soldier on for the kingdom and not be distracted by or conscripted into the culture of perversion. 25 years ago, I wrote a piece about the flag that used to fly above the South Carolina State House. I'm from North Carolina, but the flag, it became controversial all of a sudden. And this was before social media, blog sites, Facebook. I wrote this piece called Accent on the South, and it made its way all over the place by email. So here we go. You'll see that things have changed. What a hoot. All the mudslinging that surrounded the Confederate battle flag atop the State House of Columbia, South Carolina, got me thinking, why is it that we didn't hear middle-class native voices within that forensic roar? Perhaps the answer lies buried beneath the Southern accent. Mind you, I speak not of blue blood Southerners, but mainly of the lower middle class natives in the South. I was reared in a small town near Charlotte, North Carolina. Growing up, I never met a Jew, much less a Muslim. Lutherans were rare enough in our hometown, much less Roman Catholics. Basically, we're Baptists and Methodists, blacks and whites. With busing, the school I attended was 51% black. I remember being bullied on the first ground playground almost daily by two black guys. We became friends in high school. I asked them, I said, why was that? They said, oh, we don't know. We just thought that was what we were supposed to do. On one occasion, I don't recall the prevalence of any, save one occasion, I don't recall the prevalence of any Confederate battle flag or a battle over it or anything in my youth. But I do know what it means to be a Southerner. I know what it means to be prejudiced. Yet I will have to provide greater detail before you can judge me on that regard. You see, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. My folks were cotton mill workers. I know what it means to long to leave the South. I also know what it means to feel blessed to come home. My folks rarely went shopping on Saturday. That's the day that all the blacks shopped in our hometown. We would drive through the venerable old business district, the buildings on our way to the lake. Sure enough, town was teeming with darker skins. My dad said they all knew each other. It sure looked like it. They waved, greeted, visited. I suspect they were just black growing up in the South. Looked to me like the white folks were doing the same thing down at the lake. In my youth, I always believed my dad was prejudiced. Like many Southern white men, that's the way he talked. Upon getting a part-time job later in the same cotton mill where he worked, I was shocked with his interactions with everybody, particularly the blacks. It was downright good-natured and friendly. They all seemed to love each other. It was more than a bit confusing for a teenager. Although I spoke the language, I had yet to acquire the accent. I longed to leave. While studying genetics in high school, we learned that if one had a black ancestor, the biological evidence might not show up for up to 100 years. I don't know if that's true. That's what the teacher said. So at dinner that night, I tested my father. Relating the details of the class, I asked him what he would do if mom had a black baby. I was surprised at his answer. He said, I would love that child. I would give that child everything I have. I would kill your mother, though. We laughed, and I am positive he told that joke to all of his black friends at work. And I'm sure that they laughed. This was the Southern accent. As rock and roll died and disco loomed, we entered a gray area. The line between black and white was less visible. Heck, nothing was clear except everyone needed to dance. High school gym would be filled with the dance after a losing football game, and the whites would be dancing with the whites, the blacks with the blacks. But of course, the whites kept looking to the blacks to see what they're supposed to do. With disco came new battles. Blacks and whites were found mingling more and more. The overwhelming majority of music was being sung and performed by black artists. Frustrated dancers, white boys, were spending tons of money on black music. Truth be known, we probably became too accepting of many things in those days. For a while, though, we were all speaking the same language. Well, almost. There were the rebels you might see at the county fair or the Carowinds theme park. These wore black T-shirts with white letters that said, "Disco sucks." These folks, I always imagined, were probably the ones that paraded the Confederate battle flag with hatred. They obviously couldn't dance. I thought I hated the South. Television shows such as Dukes of Hazzard, the Beverly Hillbillies, Andy Griffith, allowed me to observe the way, apparently, outsiders saw my world. This, coupled with my perceived parental prejudices, drew me more and more toward black folks, outsiders, Roman Catholics, Yankees. I had an uncle who lived in Secaucus, New Jersey. Every now and then we'd visit him and tour New York City. Finally, I was away from the South. My only confusion lie in the fact that the prejudices seem to abound in the North. Ours seem tame by comparison. Due to the times and my liberal education, I never gave much thought to the Confederate battle flag, never owned one, never argued over one, except that one occasion. You see, our high school every year had some race event. It was just a rite of passage every year. There was tension, some shoving, racial slurs, then it was over. No one ever seemed to agree on what was the catalyst for that annual event, except in 1978. That was the year, we assume, some old redneck had climbed up onto the water tower and put up the Confederate battle flag. That was the most confusing race event of all. This was, after all, in the heyday of disco. We were all dancing to the same beat, except for the disco sucks people. We thought that those days of racial tensions were over. If I remember correctly, that was the year all the whites were called into the auditorium, all the blacks were called into the gymnasium. They got to go home early that day, and soon it was over. Now, my son's with me, and I hope he'll forgive me for saying this, but once we went to Jeff Davis's house in Mississippi long ago, and we bought a little Confederate battle flag. And later, I saw my young son, he was throwing it and, running and throwing the flag. And I said, Basil, men of valor and virtue died fighting for that flag. And he looked at it and he says, well, surely they had a bigger one, Dad. The summer of my freshman year in college, the Southwestern Book Company sent me to sell books door to door in the North Woods of Wisconsin. I had finally escaped the South. Though I loved Wisconsin, the accent was much different. They loved my accent, could listen to me talk for hours. But I found out they were prejudiced against the Indians. Many of them have never seen a black guy except on television. They always thought we were racist in the South. It was kind of like the pot calling the kettle Indian. After graduating college, I shared a house with a black roommate. Finally, I had arrived. Not really. He and I soon discovered that no matter how hip you are, you can still be prejudiced. I shared with him all the racial jokes I knew. He laughed. He shared with me all the white jokes, and I didn't get them. Apparently, I had not developed a Southern accent. These days, when I go back home, my mom is always relating greetings from some black acquaintance with whom she spoke recently at the store. Everyone shops on Saturdays now. There's even blacks at the lake. At least the grapevine that I know that's close to me still talks the same way. Catching a glimpse of the Andy Griffith Show presents no struggle as days in the past. Face it, we've all been through a lot. My point in saying all of this is, remind you, this was written 25 years ago. I don't appreciate the talking heads of the major media getting involved and stirring up trouble in the South. If I didn't know better, I would suspect one of them had climbed that water tower and placed that flag up there. The one on the State House in Columbia had been flying ever since pretty much the day I was born. It never seemed to be a Southern issue. In fact, writing at the time, I said, I'm not convinced it is now. Years ago, I performed a wedding in Columbia, South Carolina. There were blacks and whites in attendance. We were within eyesight of the flag. And yes, being a town in the South in the summer, you could hear disco music off in the distance. The following morning, my family and I toured Columbia. We saw blacks and whites. It was Monday. There above the Capitol building, the Confederate battle flag. It was more than likely hoisted to third-rank prominence by a black state employee. Pouring out of the State House were several busloads of children, mostly black. Thanks to the media and political indoctrination of the times, I was in search of disgruntled, unhappy, protesting faces. I saw none. Yet on the way home, I did see many bumper stickers saying, "Take it down." These are the same disco sucks people. Those of us who learn to make do with past and present differences know that everything is not black and white. Rather, it's about being separate and together. Together comes with experience, absent an outside agenda. I've even seen black men driving around in pickup trucks with Confederate flag decals. Those not from the South just won't understand. I concluded that piece by saying, frankly, outsiders, it's a Southern thing. In the working man's South, among native blacks and whites, it's a confederacy of accent. So I was reluctant to do that piece for obvious reasons, but when I wrote it, it wasn't controversial. In fact, I was so proud of myself. At the time, I was a subscriber to National Review magazine, and Florence King had the back page of National Review in those days called Misanthrope's Corner, so I sent it to her. So just as a footnote, Florence King, God rest her soul, she wrote back and she said, "Thank you so much for your note and your interesting piece on the flag. I understand the historical groups are adopting the Bonnie Blue. I wonder if they honor that it's identical to the national flag of Somalia. That should be interesting. All the best, Florence King." Just wanted to name drop there so y'all know how popular, yeah. But I'll speak of another group of people that's pretty timely. For 5 years, I was blessed to serve as a second priest at St. George in Houston. St. George, Houston is made up of mostly people from the Middle East, and the majority of those from the Middle East are from Palestine. They're from the West Bank town of Ramallah. Ramallah is a Palestinian city in the central West Bank, located 6 miles north of Jerusalem, with a population about 25,000. Ramallah was historically a Christian town, but today Muslims form the majority of the population. I'll repeat that. Historically a Christian town, today town of 25,000, the majority is Muslim. What happened? I'll let you look that up on your own. But Houston, Texas is where you'll find a host of folk that hail from Ramallah. Before I served 5 years at St. George, a convert priest who had years of experience in dealing with those from the Middle East, he told me, converts want Bible study, catechism, and continual teaching on orthodoxy. Cradles, on the other hand, want you to visit their dinner table, bless their homes, know their family, and be present for family milestones. He ended by saying, it's all good. And thanks to being immersed in the Middle Eastern culture at St. George, I experienced the extreme hospitality that defines Christianity from what they would call the old country. Being immersed in Arab culture, I learned that some of our American media coverage about Middle East affairs is just plain laughable. Suffice it to say, at the very least, all Arabs are not Muslim, and all those who live in the occupied territories are not terrorists. But given the world in which we live, I dare not say more. We politicize everything, it seems. Maybe the world's always been that way, one group demonizing another, winners and losers, shifting with the times, calling each other names, but I'll add, Father John Whiteford probably knows this is true. I know Orthodox men who drive around in pickup trucks, listening to country music, eating barbecue, might even have a skull ring on the back of their jeans, and these are Palestinians. Is there a redneck in Ramallah? Don't think so. It's just a Southern accent. We all speak the same. So come lately, some come lately, some speak with an accent, doing the day-to-day with thanks to God for family and freedom, worshiping together in the true melting pot of salvation, which is the church. So I mentioned, I don't know if anyone has a similar background. My parents were mill workers. My dad worked most of his life in the cotton mill. My mom worked in the hosiery mill in Albemarle, North Carolina. 11 of my 18 years at home, my dad who was a fixer in the mill. He was, I guess these days he would be called a technician, but he was a fixer. 11 of my 18 years at home, he worked double shifts, 8 in the morning till midnight. It's not because we were poor, far from it. That's why he worked so much, was so that we would not be poor. My mom packed his lunchbox and each day gave him $1 for snacks and sodas. If he was working 16 hours, she gave him $2. Here's the thing, when my dad's coworker lay dying in the hospital, my mom paid him a visit. Somewhere in the conversation, the man, Vernon, said, "You know, Brenda, he saved that money." "What money?" she said. "Those dollars you gave him every day." He said he was saving it in case his boys ever got in trouble. He's got $16,000 or more in that toolbox, $1,600. And it was true. She found out he had saved all that money in case his kids ever got in trouble. America's a big and complex country made up mostly of people who come from somewhere else, and it gets quirky when you mix Orthodox Christianity into the peculiarities of the South. Now, when I say the South, obviously I'm speaking of the area formerly known as the Confederacy, but for reality's sake, you have to admit, Florida's been annexed by New York, portions of Virginia resemble D.C., and Texas, let's be real, it's its own country. But still, and this is on the Ludwell website, and forgive me, this is really corny. You can tell you're Orthodox in the South when, number 10, at Pentecost, your church is decorated with kudzu. Makes more sense in North Carolina. Number 9, you spell feast with 3 letters, B, B, and Q. You say Father, Barsanuphius, and monastery without pronouncing the R. You drive 3 hours to an Orthodox parish, but you could hop on one foot with your eyes closed and a rock in your shoe to the nearest Baptist church. All of your services are in English, at least that's what you call it. There are women in your church known as Fotini Beth, Thecla Beth, and Elizabeth Beth. There are men going by Athanasius Lee, Euphrosynos Lee, and Vasily Lee. You've got white folks, black folks, even Democrats in your parish, but few Russians, Serbians, Arabs, or Greeks. This one's really, look, I'm really embarrassed about these next 2, so just be generous, all right? Number 2, you know someone who knows someone who knows someone with a velvet picture of Elvis celebrating the Last Supper. And number 1, you think grits are too good to be considered fasting. That piece, Accent on the South, developed into a known piece, OrthoDixie and Dixie. And as I go through some of this, you'll see that times have changed, but much has remained the same. Having converted to Orthodoxy in 1993, serving almost half of that time as a missionary priest, since then, I've struggled to bring others to Orthodoxy in the South. More than anything, I've learned I have a lot to learn. I've also concluded that the plethora of Orthodox jurisdictions in America makes no sense to most converts. And for jurisdictions to be successful in bringing others to Orthodoxy in the South, they should learn about Southern culture. I'd never heard of Orthodox Christianity until I was on my way to the Episcopal Seminary in 1989. Come to think of it, except for the things they see about this Ukrainian controversy, I'll bet most people in my hometown still have never heard of Orthodoxy. Historically, no Orthodox jurisdictions sent missionaries to evangelize the South. Most converts have stumbled across the faith after many years of searching. If this were different, perhaps more progress would be apparent in bridging the gap between East and South. Like St. Innocent, who brought the faith to the natives in Alaska by incarnating their native faith, bringing them to Christ, would that someone had intentionally helped the South to grow out of its native Protestantism into the fullness of the Christian faith. Instead, many of the ethnic churches
resemble Protestant churches with icons, and the assimilation, at least with church practices, has moved away from traditional Orthodox practice toward Protestant norms. Such a vacuum allows converts to flounder toward the kingdom while accumulating various practices from the smorgasbord of orthodoxy in America. It also lends itself to parish or jurisdiction hopping in hopes of finding the fittest vessel, the most correct iconography, the willing guru. Face it, smorgasbord of Orthodox jurisdictions makes no sense to converts. Finding the true faith is encumbered by also finding a dozen administrative bodies all claiming to be it. I once was told by a monk that all monks are in communion with all the other monks. Though said in jest, very much like tightly knit ethnic community with fellowships and with its ethnic world, I think the same can be said about converts. The majority are in the South. And I think most converts don't see those differences. They see the similarities in their journeys. We Southerners have many weaknesses. Paramount is our ingratiating spirit. We deliberately set out to gain others' favor by winsome actions. Hopelessly people-pleasing we are. But being cut from this cloth, we also have a weakness for taking a man at his word. If you tell us you're going to do something, more often than not, we'll expect you to do it. If you don't, there's a good chance that you'll lose our trust permanently. This behavior will differ between Southerners and Southerners and outsiders. Like any ethnic group, we trust our own a little longer. Yet to a Southerner, duplicity appears rampant in American Orthodoxy. Arabs, Russians, and other cultures are accustomed to hubris and blustering on a daily basis. In the South, we expect that of politicians. We discourage it in decent folks. Integrity in the South is expected of church leaders. Having found the true faith, we're confused by contradictory words and actions which often emanate from the various jurisdictional hierarchs. When I first became Orthodox in the Antiochian Archdiocese, someone said I should read the book called The Arab Mind to get a sense of my newly adopted home. The book claimed that in Arabic, the root word for eloquence and exaggeration are the same. Makes a lot of sense if you think about it. So an Arab man might exaggerate to show machismo. For instance, a man may shout across the street and say, "I hate you." The other man replies, "I not only hate you, I hate your family." The guy says, "I hate you and I'm going to kill you." And later you'll see them eating in a restaurant together. I hate to tell you what would happen in these parts if that kind of, I don't know about here, but we still stop on the side of the road for the funerals passing where I'm from. Contrary to outsiders' perceptions, Southerners do not put on airs. Though we may be hospitable, friendly, and civil, what you see is what you get. If we share openly with you, it means we trust you. Once you break that trust, it may be irreparable. All are welcomed here, yet we are easily offended. If offended, the offending party will be cut off until reparation. Our people-pleasing nature lends itself to oversensitivity. It just comes with the territory. In the South, admiration comes easy. Respect is earned over time. Like all those outside paradise, Southerners gossip, but in a region where being idle is sometimes considered a virtue, idle talk can't be far behind. I don't mean the kind of vindictive gossip popularized in our media, though we have that too. Rather, Southerners carry on conversations in a way that others might view as gossiping, and God help us, at times it is. Yet often this is a manner of couching subjects within an engaging tale. It's the way we talk around here. Southerners are self-effacing. We can take criticism if it's couched in civility and or humor. For us, if direct confrontation is necessary, things have already gone too far. Sometimes our neighbors to the north skip all the niceties and cut right to the chase. Northern aggression continues. And since all the Orthodox jurisdictions hail from different cultures with the home offices up in the north, This element of cultural warfare persists within church dynamics. Brutal honesty is not only unwelcome, but most often rejected in the South. Before attending my first gathering of clergy and church wardens in the Russian church outside of Russia, Rokor, a parishioner said, "What's the meeting about?" I said, "Well, they'll probably argue and yell at each other for a few hours, and then we'll have lunch. After lunch, they'll argue and yell some more, and then we'll kiss each other goodbye and go home." I'm not clairvoyant, but boy, was that the way it was. You could recognize the Southerner if he were being honest. He would be the one sitting there with his mouth closed. And if you scratch him hard enough, he'd probably say, "I think all you are crazy." But don't ask, don't tell has always been policy where I'm from. Being slightly dishonest in the name of civility is considered a virtue. You yell at a Southerner and it might have eternal consequences. When we speak, all that's required of you is to politely listen till it's your turn. We don't take kindly yelling, interruption, jeering, or public ridicule. We may not break bread with you until there's resolution. You don't have to agree, mind you, but you must behave in such a way that assures civil discussion and debate. It may be that we take things personally. We operate on the assumption that you do too. Therefore, quite selfishly, the golden rule, no matter who you are, applies. Northerners are most often defined by their family's nation of origin. This type of identification is foreign in the South. Here, folks are identified by their family name and or their religious affiliation. I've often heard of Northerners speak of someone being Italian, Ukrainian, German, and along with this description comes their implied religion, Roman Catholic, Orthodox, Lutheran. It's not the same in the South. Here, folks are identified by their religion, Baptist, Episcopalian, Methodist, Charismatic. So this is why sometimes for those in the North, they are confused as to why anyone would convert to Orthodoxy. I mean, can you convert from an Italian to a German? Can you convert from a Ukrainian to a South American? Folks in the rural South usually attend the church nearest their home. In the country, you'll find mostly Baptists, Methodists, Pentecostals. Now these days, everybody's non-denominational. Towns will have Presbyterian and Episcopal churches, and here and there you'll find Lutheran pockets and the occasional Roman Catholic church. Presbyterian and Episcopal churches used to be, at least, churches that you maybe worked your way up into because of your job or your social status. One of the things that Orthodox converts have to get used to is what's called Orthodox people time. We are not used to people being late. I mean, you tell a Southerner what time to be there, 6 o'clock, he's going to get there at 5:45. Don't want to miss a thing. And God help us when it comes to saying goodbye. Now, I think things have changed in our day, but when I was growing up, my family on Saturday nights, most Saturday nights, they didn't drink, they're Baptists, they played Rook. It's a card game. Anyone ever heard of Rook? Yeah. So they played Rook on Saturday nights. This would go late into the night. And so one man that's sitting there at the table, he says, "Well, got to go to the house." My dad would say, "What's your hurry?" It's like midnight. He said, "What's your hurry?" Yeah, and he would tell him for 20 minutes what his hurry was. And then they would get up from the table, I'm not exaggerating, and then stand at the door, with the door being shut, stand at the door and spend another 5 or 10 minutes. They would go outside and stand outside and talk for another 5 or 10 minutes. Promise you, the man would get in his car with his family and roll down his window, and they would talk more. And as the car was driving off, my dad would say, "I thought they'd never leave." Southern culture is at least as relevant as other forms of ethnicity, whether Orthodox or not. We converts appreciate the foods and festivities of our adopted culture, but must we discard norms and ways and replace them with traditional Orthodox ways? Fundraising's fine, but what about tithing? Lamb's good, but what about, I know I'm in Texas, I wrote this in North Carolina, pork barbecue. Pascha and caliche is festive, but that first bite of pecan pie, and actually, the first bite that I have of anything at Pascha has to be a deviled egg. Converts have lots of extended family and friends that remain Protestant. Most find themselves in awkward situations. Wednesdays and Fridays, fast days, the seasonal fast. You know, you're supposed to eat what served you. So one year I had received some people into the church. They had moved away. I called them to see how they were doing in their first Lenten fast after I'd received them. They said, "We're doing fine." I said, "Really? How's the fasting?" They said, "We're just eating over at friend's house every night." Through catechism, reading of the fathers, and other instruction, converts fashion an ideal orthodoxy toward which to struggle. Then they might get to know some of the cradle orthodox, only to be turned off. This can develop into a dichotomy leading to judgmentalism, Phariseeism, and a sort of convert superior orthodoxy, which is far from ideal. We must struggle toward the ideal in humility. Thanks to the lackadaisical piety of some cradles, this can present a great challenge. To the eyes of the beginner, many cradles seem lax in piety, dress, service attendance, fasting, and orthodox zeal versus ethnic identity, and this can be a temptation. We had a wedding at St. George once where there were 8 priests involved, and one of them was a archpriest in the Greek archdiocese who had come down to help with the service. So afterward, the clergy had their own table at the reception, and I'm joking around, and I said, you know, if you go to a convert's house as a priest to do the house blessing, you don't know where to start because every wall has icons on them. You go to a Greek's house, you have to take your own icon. Everybody laughed except that Greek priest. I still regret saying this, but he looked at me very seriously. He says, "We have icons now, Father Joseph." And I said, "Oh, good." He said, "We try to stay abreast of current trends." So what's an Orthodox Southern convert to do? Assimilation with the Protestant milieu is not an option. Been there, was that. Christianity plus icons and typicon is not the answer. Why bother? Becoming a dirt-eating, tree-hugging druid is not the way. I mean, really. But these are all options that you see in the church. Thanks to the war between the states and Reconstruction, Southerners have a strong distrust of outside authority. As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. There's an underdog thread that binds us Southerners together. Yet when asked to perform a task by those in authority, those whom we respect, you can bet it will be done. We are teachable. However, all things must be in accord with proper respect. Our experience teaches that there's virtue in losing when done graciously. Nevertheless, we have strong suspicions regarding authority. Those in positions of Orthodox leadership would do well to familiarize themselves with the norms of Southern behavior and expectations. After all, if you were serious about evangelizing another land, which the South is, you would do no less. This is not to say that the South should secede from the ethnic orthodoxy of the North. Rather, Southern Orthodoxy should be allowed to flourish with its own personality and character, with proper hierarchical oversight. Any community that can appreciate this and encourage Southerners toward the kingdom within their own Southern culture will do well in making solid converts to the faith in Dixie. Some years ago, after delivering that talk, Orthodoxy in Dixie, I was approached by an Asian woman who said, "Why do you keep saying convert? Why do you keep saying convert? I'm a catechumen, and when I come into the church, I should be Orthodox. I am not convert. I never use that word. You shouldn't either." Y'all, the only thing worse than being schooled by a catechumen is being schooled by a tonsured reader who happens to be a catechumen. Anyway. When I wrote the book, One Flew Over the Onion Dome, it was a form of therapy, but most of the people that told me they appreciated it were actually cradles because they didn't understand converts. They'd only known their world. They didn't understand converts and what struggles they brought to the faith. A woman I'd never seen before approached the chalice in a crowded church to receive communion. I asked, "Are you Orthodox?" She said, "Of course." I said, "Well, it's not of course. I don't know you." She said, "I'm Lebanese." Now, when I told that story to other Lebanese, they said she was probably Maronite. It can get confusing, like those who claim they were born Orthodox. You ever seen the birth of a baby? How many men have been in that room when those babies are born? Raise your hand. Yeah. You ain't born Orthodox. You're born slimy, icky. Go on. You're not born Orthodox. Funny thing is, I've heard that cradle kids of convert parents are also referred to as converts. My son, cradle Orthodox. My kids, cradle Orthodox. But we're still considered converts because, well, we don't look the part. It begs the question, what does convert mean? Here again, I'm going to have to apologize to you all. If they have a back door here, I might have to leave. But what does convert mean? I guess it's like the omnipresent, politically correct debate over the so-called N-word. You know the debate, you know the word. It seems the current accepted use is reserved only to a club. If you're not in that club, you can't use that word. If you do, it's called hate speech. I get it. I don't use the word. I don't listen to songs that do. I don't even know people that use the word. Obviously, I'm not in the club. But once I was in a little grocery store in Louisiana. I was the only, what can I say, white guy in the checkout line. And in walked a young African-American, there's a silly word, in walked a black guy, walked in and yelled to the guy in front of me and said, "What's up, my convert?" To which his friend replied, "Hey, convert, what's up with you?" Now you realize I've substituted words there. But as a convert, what was I supposed to do? Smile? Laugh? Answer? Both of these men, good-natured, were born with a skin color different than mine. They're born black. I was born, for lack of a term better, white. Neither of them nor I was born Christian, much less Orthodox. So in that sense, we're all in the same boat. So's the guy in Greece, Romania, Russia. You are not born Orthodox, but I know what you mean if you say you were. And no, even after 30 years of struggling to be Orthodox, I guess labeling myself a convert is not fully accurate. I've never labeled myself prejudiced or racist, but to some extent, aren't we all? I mean, how are races perpetuated? Enough of that. Christ is born, but the Christian race is not born. Christians are reborn in Christ, the church, through baptism, period. Red and yellow, black and white, ain't nothing a little baptism won't cure. In other words, we all convert to new life in Christ. Orthodoxy, if you will, but it does not end there. It's a daily struggle, this conversion. To call those who convert, those who are received into the church, converts, is not quite accurate. Maybe we should stop using it. Fine. I'll stop using it when people stop saying they were born Orthodox. We're all slaves. We're born into slavery to Satan, sin, death, and we're saved by converting to slavery in Christ. The blood into which we are born is the same blood for all of us. It is the blood of Adam that leads to death. The blood into which we are reborn, no matter our nationality or ethnicity or skin color, the blood of Christ in the chalice leads to eternal life. This new life of perpetual conversion is available, a free gift to all. We are all the same in this regard. Come to think of it, it is the sum of what we are. I was talking with a Serbian priest once, making light of Serbian piety, Orthodox piety. He said the Serbs don't always follow the rules of piety, but they are really, really serious about remaining steadfastly Orthodox. He related the following tale. At a party one evening, various Orthodox fellows were arguing about which brand of Orthodox was the greatest. When one fellow exclaimed, it was obviously the Greeks. When challenged, he said, why do you say the Greeks? He said, oh my goodness, so much. I mean, there's the theology of the church fathers, the language of the New Testament, the creed, the very core of the faith theologically. Of course the Greeks are best. Another man argued that it was surely the Russians. When asked to explain, he said, Russians have given the church beauty. Just look at all the beautiful Russian churches, the cathedrals, the vestments, the gold, the iconography. No doubt the Russians are best. That's when the Serbs shouted, stop it! We Serbs are the best. We deserve the honor. They all looked at him and said, what have the Serbs offered? He replied, I do not know. Whatever it is, we'll die for it. You know, for converts, I'm assuming I'm speaking to mainly converts. Converts have this journey and this story. And, you know, sometimes I actually, forgive me, I kind of dread being around converts because they say, how did you become Orthodox? Like, oh, God. You never ask a Serb or a Russian or a Palestinian or Greek that. For many American Orthodox converts, places like Bethlehem, Jerusalem, the Holy Sepulchre, the River Jordan are mythical landmarks most often seen in the pages of a book. Yet I served in a church where many of the parishioners were from the Holy Land, even Bethlehem and Jerusalem. The Jordan River is in their backyard. How did they become Orthodox? Nothing to it. Look, when folks asked me what I was before becoming Orthodox, I used to say, well, I grew up Baptist in North Carolina. That's a requirement. And they would laugh, but it was pretty much true. Orthodox white folks do the same. Oh, you're from Serbia, Romania, Greece, Russia, Syria? You must be Orthodox. I know there's Muslims in those countries, but forgive me, the Muslim thing for most people in the South is relatively new. I've got a felt cap that I wear when I'm not dressed as a priest. It's not a clergy hat. It's like Kangol. It's a secular hat. I've had Greeks say to me, oh, that hat makes you look Greek. No lie. I've had Russians say, oh, that hat, you look Russian. I'm assuming what they're saying, with that hat, you don't look so much like a redneck. You ever seen a white boy doing the debki? It's funny looking, isn't it? You ever seen a Russian belly dancer? No. These are things that are foreign to our culture. Honest to goodness, again, forgive me for relating this story, but I was at a church regional fair. There's a banquet at a Lebanese restaurant. I'm brand new priest. It was my first real taste of Arabic cuisine and loud, exotic Arabic music. When, and I am not making this up, I promise you on a stack of Bibles, this is absolute truth, there came a voice over the loudspeaker. It says, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the amazing Mustafa. And a belly dancer came out. This is a church function. I'm the only white boy, except for a guy I brought with me to this affair. So the woman comes out. She's very attractive. She's very talented. And it's like a runway. I mean, we're all just sitting there, and she's belly dancing. Well, she was doing her thing, and it was pretty amazing. So I sat there. I was a brand new priest, and I was an Orthodox white boy, and I was wondering, what should I do? And I looked, and there were the other clergy, the Arab clergy, they were clapping, the women were clapping, and I'm just sitting there, what am I supposed to do? It's a long way from the Baptist church. We didn't have belly dancers. I did grow up watching I Dream of Jeannie, so I knew a little bit about it. But I looked around the dining hall, everybody's getting into it. So I thought, okay, I get into it. I was clapping. Hulla, the gal that was in charge of this fair, she said, Father Joseph. Look, she's talking to me. I said, what? She said, it's the art. Concentrate on the art. Now, she was messing with me. How do you, anyway. Forgive me, Father John. ROCOR clergy don't use tobacco products. They don't smoke. And that's far into the Arab culture and the Arab church. And so I mentioned this one time to my bishop, Bishop Basil. I said, you can't smoke in ROCOR. He said, oh, I know, because at the time he was smoking. He said, the St. Vladimir's Octet got invited to one of the ROCOR churches up in the Northeast when he was working with them. And they said, don't take your cigarettes. Don't take your cigarettes. They frown on smoking. So he said, sure enough, I left my cigarettes at home, but you could not get your elbows on the table for the liquor bottles. Right? These things are foreign to many converts coming into the church. So I'll end this section by saying, to the Greeks, culture won't save you. To the Arabs, food won't save you. To the Russians, vodka won't save you. If there are Protestants among us, they might say, preach it, brother, preach it. I'll say it, Protestantism ain't gonna save you either. Only love saves, only love saves, only love saves. On the last day, the Lord's not going to ask, where are you from? On the last day, our Lord is not going to ask, you Greek? On the last day, the Lord's not going to say, pravoslavny? On the last day, the Lord's not going to ask, do you like vinegar-based pork barbecue or the sweet red sauce? But if he does, the answer is vinegar. Red and yellow, black and white, the Lord's going to say, have you loved others as I loved you? Have you loved others as I loved you? But don't take it from me, take it from the scriptures, the witness of the saints, the church. What do we, the members of Christ's body, the church, say to the Baptists, Anglicans, Methodists, Lutherans, nominal Christians, non-denominational pagans, to the non-believers, even to the Jews and Muslims? What do we say to them? Well, we say, y'all come on over. Y'all convert too. Y'all come to the true faith. We'll make room. We'll make room, won't we? First time I did this talk was in front of a Greek clergy laity in presence of the bishop. And when I got to the end, I said, we'll make room, won't we? And they all started cheering, Greeks. They all started cheering. I said, whoa, I haven't gotten to the punchline. And the punchline is, just kidding. We're not ready yet. But we're getting there. We're getting there. We've come a long way in the South. We're getting there. Gatherings from everything I've heard today, speeches, everything leads me to believe that we're getting there. So my time's coming to an end, but I did want to mention a couple of people. Had I more time, I would say more about them, but I was once on a flight from Atlanta to Wichita, and the woman that was beside of me, this was back in the days when you still talk to people on airplanes. When she found out I was from Stanley County, North Carolina, she almost lost her mind because she was one of these genealogy, the family tree finders back in the day you would hire to do your family tree. And she said Stanley County is akin to the Galapagos Islands in her field because all the DNA is still there. No one leaves Stanley County. Living or dead, the DNA is all still there. Made her job easier. She was amazed that I got out of Stanley County. She was even more amazed that I was Orthodox and a priest. So, of course, she asked me how that happened. And the names that were related, I could not refrain from relating them. Father Gordon Walker, I won't say much about him. St. Ignatius, Franklin, Tennessee. missionary to the South. He's a Southerner. I also have to mention Father Damian Hart, my spiritual father for 16 years. I still consider him my spiritual father. I have many stories, none are shareable. I'm telling you. Father Mark Mancuso did a great job talking about him last year. But one I'll mention that many of you may not have heard, and it's not for my lack of trying. Dr. Charles Caldwell, my son, Basil, is named Basil after Bishop Basil Essie. His middle name's Caldwell for Dr. Caldwell. Dr. Caldwell taught at Nashotah House, where I was a seminarian back in the early 90s. And we kept in touch over the years. Brilliant man. He prayed the Akathis to the Mother of God every day before we had Vespers at Nashotah House. We learned more about Orthodoxy from him than we did Anglicanism, and yet he was still an Anglican because his wife did not want to convert. So anyway, toward the end of his life, he wrote me and told me he was nearing the end. So I went to visit him, and I took chrism. I thought, you know what? If he's going to die Orthodox. So after we had our visit, I'm getting ready to leave. I said, Father, I brought chrism. He said, let's do it. And so and his wife was not in favor. So I backed off. I knew it wasn't going to happen. Some years later, he related he had about 3 or 4 months to live. So I didn't know what to do. I wrote him back and, saluted him in all of his struggles. And I said, if you wish, I can come visit you and I'll bring chrism, but just to make sure I didn't want to offend him, I put a little emoticon like a smiley face in my letter. He wrote back and said, yes, please come and bring chrism. I want to be Orthodox. I drug my feet. I didn't know what to do. He's in Florida. He's from DeLand, Florida. He was living in Naples. I'm in Houston, Texas. Whose parishioner is he going to be? What is this? So I called my bishop, and he said, go, by all means. I said, whose parishioner? He says, yours. So I went around this time of year, 2012, went into his hospital room. His family's there gathered. He's got a few days to live. And he was radiant. And I said, are you ready for this? And he said, I sure am. They thought, and I did, that he was talking about being chrismated. I know he was talking about dying. So I confessed him, chrismated him, communed him, anointed him. There's a lot more to this story. But I went to see him the next day before I went home. And he gave me a disc, and it had all of his teaching notes on it from a decade. And he said, I don't know if it's all Orthodox. Can you please make sure and orthodoxize it and see that it gets published? I worked on that for like 4 years, God rest his soul, and it's still not published. I don't know that it's publishable. What I'm going to relate to you right now, kind of in line with our talks this week, is not theological. But Father Caldwell, to his credit, or at least to understand him, he always emphasized he was not a conservative. He was a traditionalist. Conservatives tend to be reactionaries who want to go back to the time before the last war, whenever that war was. He was a traditionalist. So I'll end with this. And maybe one saying by Dr. Engelhardt. Forgive me if I'm going over. Regarding Dixie, Dr. Caldwell, who was chrismated Dionysius, says the Puritans and the Yankees waged war on the Southern Confederacy during 1861 to 1865 in what a historian has called the Second American Revolution. The South was fighting the last battle of the English Civil War. The Puritans and the Anglicans and Roman Catholics were fighting for the divine right of kings in the Commonwealth or the parliamentary republic. The Union and the Confederacy were both fighting for freedom, but freedom meant different things to both of them. The differences between them could be found in the sprightly song, The Battle Cry of Freedom, which had different lyrics for the Union and the Confederacy. You all may know this, forgive me. The Union sang, we will welcome to our numbers the loyal, true, and brave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. And though he may be poor, not a man shall be a slave, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The Union forever, hurrah, boys, hurrah, down with the traitor, up with the star. While we rally round the flag, boys, rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. The lyrics for the Confederacy, their version of the song, said they have laid down their lives on the bloody battlefield, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Their motto is resistance to tyrant will not yield, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Our Dixie forever, she's never at a loss. Down with the eagle, up with the cross. We'll rally round the bonny flag, we'll rally once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom. Which brings me to Dr. Tristram, Reader Herman Engelhardt, another giant in my life, who says, as every young Texan Christian of school age knows, Austin will surely be the fourth Rome. And if not Austin, then Dallas or perhaps Abilene. The patriarch of the Texans will then bear the weight of that priority among the church in the future diocese of Santa Fe. As the capital of the empire of Holy Texas, it will preside in first loving care for all true believing and worshiping churches. Once all is put in order, the empire can be reestablished and the populace of Texas baptized in the Brazos. Then the Orthodox mounted posses can saddle up and ride out to the second Rome to restore Hagia Sophia, Christendom's great temple, carrying the bonny blue flag next to the emperor's banner of gold with the proud double-headed eagle. Here's a piece of work. The culture war for the Union is lost. However, that which the South has traditionally held dear, culturally, morally, ethically, and though they may not yet realize it sacramentally, is found in the home we found, the Orthodox Church. Our recent forefathers in the faith, for example, Fathers Gordon Walker, Father Damien, Father Caldwell, Dr. Engelhardt, they didn't leave it all on the field. I don't believe they did. They didn't leave it all on the field. There's a toolbox, a treasure chest, if you will, of which they saved for us in case the children needed it. Persevere. Thank you.